to the Jazz Ranch hipsters, flippers, finger-popping daddies, and groovy chicks. I'm your altered, dominant ego man. You can call me Mr. Ego if you like. And I'm glad you joined me. You know, I always try to tell these stories about the KH. And they are true stories. I never make these up. You can't make up these stories, you know. Well, anyway, years ago when he was playing out in Provincetown, out in P-Town, out in Cape Cod, you know, he was playing at a club there called The Flagship with this artist fellow who played saxophone, and they had a nice little duo going on there. And actually, they used to get Norman Mailer used to show up, and Robert Motherwell. They used to come in the club to hear him play. But anyway, there were all these characters out there. There was this one cat that, you know, used to ride his bike around town with a crazy hat and outfit on. He used to come in the club, and he would ask for these requests all the time, you know, and they had a tip jar, you know. So finally he came in, they finally said to him, well, you know, if you're going to make all these requests, you got to put some bread in the tip jar. You know, so the next night the cat came in, and he had this big loaf of French bread, and he stuck it right in the tip jar like that, you know, and they got a laugh out of that. But anyway, at the end of the night, they didn't play his request, so he took the loaf of bread out, and he brought a salami with him, and he cut all the bread up into pieces, and he made salami sandwiches, and he served it to all the people in the club. Now, if you believe that one, I'll tell you another one. Wait a minute, no, here comes the KH. He doesn't like me telling these stories, but they are true. No, I guarantee they're true. I gotta go. Hello, friends. Welcome, hip cats and groovy chicks. Welcome back to the Jazz Ranch. And I'm sorry about the altered, dominant ego man. You know, he makes up these stories, but actually that's a true story about the character that came in and put the bread, the French bread, in the tip jar. He did do that, but he just didn't make the sandwiches with the salami. He didn't do that part, so he kind of elaborated on the story to make it more funny or whatever it is. At any rate, he's going back to Newark soon, we hope. You know, I have people requested, they ask me, will say, how do you get that fluidity in your left hand? How do you play those voicings and go from one position to another and keep it flowing and so on? I'm going to try to show you that tonight, as well as I'm going to try to show you a particular chord that's very interesting. It's two stacked triads on top of each other that make up a minor 9/11 chord. I'm going to be talking about that chord specifically and using it on a tune that I had a request for called I Didn't Know What Time It Was. So here we go now with left hand voicings on the song I Didn't Know What Time It Was with a backing track. starting out, I get a lot of requests to talk about or illustrate how I use the left hand. And I really don't play block chords that much, although I still do play block chords occasionally. And block chords are the first types of voicings for the left hand that you want to learn. In other words, these. What I tend to use a lot, and particularly in this tune, was I used tenths and sevenths, like that. And then I used inversions of block chords, which I call rootless voicings. I used some fourths, and I used some just open voicings like this. Root and seventh. Now those are easy for beginners to play, these open sevenths. The tenths, well, that depends on if you can stretch them, but they're a little bit difficult that way. But I usually do 110 to 17, 110 to 17. That's what I was doing here, like this. You see how that's working, 110 to 17. Now this chord that I wanted to talk about that's very interesting is the minor 9 chord with the 11th added. This is a great sounding chord. Now it's a minor 7, so E minor 7. Let's take, well, we're going to start with F sharp minor 7. We're in the key of G major, so the relative minor is E minor. We're going to be starting on the 2 chord. Actually, I'm going to play it in its minor 7 form rather than its half diminished form, but it's F sharp minor 7, which is root, minor 3rd, 5th, 7th, then the 9th is here, and the 11th is there. So there's a beautiful sounding chord. Now notice that it's interesting in that it has 2 triads stacked, a minor triad and a major triad. Let's take it down chromatically, and this is a good thing to practice moving chords chromatically. Let's take it down to an easier chord to visualize. Well, there's E minor, right? That's a little easier. Now you can see an E minor triad there with a D major triad on top. That gives you a very rich sounding chord. It's a minor 7 with a 9th and 11th added. If you added a 13th, then you'd have that up there, but I'm not doing that. But you're going to find a lot of tunes will have this particular kind of chord or voicing in which the melody is on the 11th, or it's the same as the 4th, but it's not the same as a dominant sus4. If we had a dominant sus4, it would be this. Okay, now that's E, actually E7, E9 with a sus4. Sus4 is right there. It's actually in the melody. Sus4 is the same as an 11, but it's 11 is an octave higher than a sus4. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 8, 9, 10, 11. So essentially I'm playing 4 types of voicings in the left hand. I'm playing the roots and the tenths, the root and 10th, the root and 7th, root and 10th, and root and 7th. In the cycle like that, and filling in the harmonies in the right hand so that I get a nice balance of harmonies in the mid-range where you want them, and things spread out below and above. Like that. Then the other thing that I did was I did open 7ths like this. Like that, and I also played this chord, which is a 4th voicing. That's a C6-9. There's the 3rd, the 6th, and the 9th. It can also be a G6-9. If you put a G in the bass, then that's the 6th, this is the 9, and this is the 5th. So they're interchangeable. So the first chord of the bridge is G6-9, so I think I played that voicing there. So if that's the 4th voicing. And then the next type would be the rootless chords, taking the block chord, inverting it, E minor 7 or F sharp. Let's take the F sharp minor 7, inverting it, the first inversion, then dropping the root, adding the 9th, and then there's the 11th. So there's just an easy move there from the F sharp to the B7, if you can see that. If I did it in root position, that would be the F sharp minor 7, the B7 would be here. So I'm doing it up here now. So the B7 can be there, you see, it's just a short move. So this is, let's define it. That's the F sharp, that's the minor third, the fifth, the flat 7, the 9. When I go to the B13 now, I just have to move this note down to there. And now that becomes the flat 7 of the B, the 9, the third, and the 13 up here. How do we know that's the 13? Well, we're going to count it above its root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that's the 13. It's the same as the 6, but an octave higher. So that is what I call the A form. If you've looked at that video on the rootless voicings, that's the A form. The 2, the 5, then it would move to here. So this is F sharp minor 9, 11 to a B13, goes to an E minor 9, 11 to an A 7, 13. So there's your chord, first two set of chords. Then I went to this chord. Now that's the A minor 7 chord, but it's in third inversion. How do I know that? Well, 1, there's our root position, there's first inversion, second inversion, third inversion, drop the root, add the 9. So this is the B form now because of the position of it. You see, this sounds better in the third inversion, whereas this chord, these chords sound better in the first inversion, while the A minor 9 chord sounds better in the third inversion because it gets me into this mid-range where I want to be. See, if I did the first inversion, I'd be way up here. So, and if I did these in the third inversion, I'd be down here. So you see, I'd be like kind of low. So they sound better in the first inversion, and the A minor sounds better in the third inversion. So you're going to mix up these A and B forms. You want to watch my video on the A and B form of rootless voicings. These are very important for when you're soloing and you're playing in the upper register to get a nice sounding chord in the mid-range. See? I could do this fourth voicings. You see, so I'm mixing it up like that. Now you say, well, how do you find those positions so easily? Well, okay, we'll talk about that. You know, this is funny, but I have people, they write to me and say, I wish I had a teacher like you when I was first learning to play piano or learning jazz and so on. And, you know, I feel the same way. I wish I had a teacher like myself, but, you know, I had some bad teachers. I had some good teachers. You know, when I was like around 13, 14, I had a teacher that I would go in for the lesson. It was in New London, in this building. I go up to the second floor, you know, and he had this room overlooking the street and an old upright piano in there. And during most of the lesson, he was looking out the window at the traffic or the people walking by. And I was wondering, like, and I was a good student. I was wondering, like, I practiced. I was trying to figure out, like, well, what did he do when he had a bad student in there or someone who didn't practice? What was he doing? Walking around the room or reading a book? What was he doing? But anyway, just continuing on that previous thought, you know, when I was in my early 20s, I started out in banking, and I went out to the West Coast. I was unhappy. I switched to music. I came back to the East Coast, got into music school. I didn't get my music degree until I was around 28. And I moved to Hartford and I started playing with musicians, and I was fortunate to get into one of the best bands in Hartford because I had been practicing a lot and I got pretty good, you know, and so like I got into the best band, and the advantage of that was I was playing with musicians that were on my level. We were all on the same level. And so we inspired each other. There was nobody holding us back, or there was no weak link in the group. You see, now, if you're going to play with other musicians, you want to play with musicians that are better than you, or at least equal to your abilities. And they're going to inspire you, and you're going to have a lot more fun, and you're not going to doubt yourself. Because it's very easy to play in a group, and they're not
playing at your level, and you'll start wondering, well, whose problem is this? Is it mine? Am I not playing well, or is my time off, or who is it, you know? And it may be the bass player, or it may be the drummer, or it may be someone else, you know. It could be even the horn player. I mean, it could be anyone. But the best advice I can give you is to play with musicians that are at least as equally good as you are, or better. Preferably better, because you'll learn from them. I remember the first time I played with a really named musician. It was Clifford Jordan. He was a famous musician from New York. And I was playing in a house band in Hartford with some really good players, actually, and the drummer and bass player. But we brought in someone who was even better than the three of us. And I was nervous about it and wondering if I could handle it, you know. It was my first time. I was in my early 20s, or, you know, maybe 20 or 21. And Clifford Jordan came in, and I was nervous. But anyway, he started playing. He was so good. I mean, everything about his playing was so good. There was so much clarity in his playing. His ideas were great. His time was perfect. I mean, it was so easy to play with him, and he had a great personality just as a person. He was very complimentary to us. He was a nice cat, you know. He called tunes that we knew we could play, and so on. And so it was a wonderful experience. It wasn't always that way. I played with other players that were name artists that were not that way, but I learned something from that. When you play with someone who's really good, they are going to bring you up to their level, or at least try to, you know, and you're going to aspire to that. So that's what you want to do, if possible, is to play with people who are better than you, because you'll learn from them. You learn a lot. Wrapping up, just a little bit of review. The voicings I'm using in the left hand are the 10th to the 7th, the 10 to the 7. That's that's the first voicing. Next was the open sevenths like that. Then there was the fourth voicings, like that, or like that. And then there was the rootless voicings that are inverted block chords, like that. And then talking about the minor 9 chord with the 11 in it, like this: 1, flat 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. That beautiful voicing in which there's 2 chords superimposed or stacked, and a minor triad and a major triad, which is actually a step below, if you think of it that way. You know, the root of it is a step below. So it's like an E minor on the bottom and a D major on the top. Signing off from the Jazz Ranch. Thanks so much for joining me, hip cats and groovy chicks. Please write to me. I love to hear from you. I always try to answer all my comments. You know, if you read my comments, you will see that people write to me, and I do try to answer them. At least I try to catch up. So if I haven't answered your comment, give me a little bit more time. And until next time, I'll say in the words of my great friend Hermie Dressel, and you know I told you who he is. He was a friend of mine who in New York, who was a record producer, a jazz drummer. He tried to help me out. He did help me out, and he was a good friend for many years. And he always, when I left his office, he always said the same words: swing loose. And we'll see you next time around. Bye-bye.